Welcome to Inside Politics. I'm Kevin Klein. Today, I want to talk about the response to my recent column on the Liberal government's quiet interest in taxing your home equity. The response was predictable, but revealing. Instead of engaging with facts, many online resorted to the usual routine, hashtags, name calling, shouting fake news into a void, and hurling emojis like they're making a serious argument. Some even took the time to send me an email to yell at me. Now let that sink in. That's the level of discourse from people who refuse to confront what's actually happening in our country today. When faced with uncomfortable truths, they lash out, not with logic, not with fact, but with hate and deflection. So let's set the record straight again, because the facts are not up for debate. The Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, a federal crown corporation, has investigated the possibility of a home equity tax on more than one occasion, using taxpayer dollars to fund that research. That's not speculation. That's not hearsay. That's not fear-mongering. Those are facts, and they're irrefutable. The Liberal government paid a group called Generation Squeeze, led by activist Paul Kershaw, to study how the government could tap into Canadians' home equity, including their primary residences. Now, Kershaw, by the way, believes homeowners are lottery winners who didn't earn their wealth, but they lucked into it. That's the ideology being advanced to the highest levels of government. That's the ideology I have a problem with. But it didn't stop there. These proposals were presented directly to Liberal federal cabinet ministers. That's not a hearsay again. That's not a speculation. Those are facts, and they're irrefutable. And those same ministers are now part of Mark Carney's team as he positions himself to be the next Prime Minister of Canada. Yet, when this is raised publicly, the online mob didn't want to talk about the facts. They wanted to shout it down. They didn't check public records, CMHC reports, or even the government's own briefing documents. Instead, they defaulted to name calling and the tired claim of conservative fear-mongering. Let me be clear. This is not about partisanship. Had the Conservatives done this and they were in power, we would be having the exact same conversation. Because this is about math. This is about reality. The federal government is $1.2 trillion in debt. The interest payments on that debt are expected to surpass $54 billion this year, which means the federal government will spend more on paying interest for our debt than they will on healthcare transfers to the provinces. Now think about that. Those are facts, and they're irrefutable. We will spend more on paying the interest on our debt than we will on healthcare for Canadians. This simply isn't sustainable. The government runs out of money, and when they do, they have to find new sources of revenue. That's when you come in. That's when your house comes in. The total home equity held by Canadians is over $4.7 trillion. It's one of the largest pools of private wealth in the country. For millions of Canadians, especially baby boomers, it's the only retirement fund they have. They don't have big pensions. They have a paid-off house and a hope that it will carry them through their later years. Yet, the Liberal government has quietly been circling that money. Now, some people claim this doesn't affect them because they don't own a home. Or worse, I've heard some say, good, tax the rich. But owning a modest home in Winnipeg, Saskatoon, or Halifax does not make someone rich. It makes them responsible. And punishing them with new taxes isn't equity. It's theft disguised as fairness. So why are so many people rushing to defend a government that keeps denying the idea publicly while investigating it on more than one occasion, which is fact, and irrefutable? Well, I think that's because we've entered a dangerous era where facts are being ignored if they don't fit your narrative. If something doesn't come from a subsidized media outlet or a far right-wing media outlet for some, or a friendly talking head, it's labeled fake. Never mind that the Winnipeg Sun is one of the few, if not the only, locally owned, independent daily newspaper in Canada. It's not bought and paid for by the government. I mean, if you're waiting for the CBC to challenge this government's spending habits or debt trajectory, don't hold your breath. I mean, the Carney Liberals just gave the CBC another $150 million on top of the $1 billion plus they received. They did this on April 1st. In fact, on April 1st, they gave out over $40 billion to government departments. There was no debate, no discussion, nothing. They just handed over the money through a special order through the Governor General. Meanwhile, when someone challenges that or tries to bring up the numbers, when someone dares to say, hey, maybe taxing people's homes isn't the solution to overspending, maybe it's cutting back on spending, they get branded as conspiracy theorists, a hack, or worse. This is what passes for debate in Canada today. And frankly, it's embarrassing. It's worrisome. I mean, look, when governments get desperate, they don't go after billionaires. We know this, right? They go after the easiest targets, the ones who can't move their money around or hide it, the ones that don't have expensive accountants or lobbyists or offshore bank accounts. They go after you and I. And it's time to stop being distracted by the trolls and political tribalism in this country and have a serious adult conversation about what's happening in Canada today. We need to talk about our money issues. We need to talk about the fact that we really can't sustain the way we're going. We need to talk about the fact that we can't keep pretending that everything is fine. Because if we don't, the decisions being made for us will continue, and they're not in the best interest of all of us. Look, I'm just asking you to pay attention, but don't pay attention to hashtags, insults, or headlines. Pay attention to what's actually happening in our country. Look at the debt we have. Look at the interest payments we're paying. Look at what you pay in taxes. Look at the reality that more Canadians pay more in tax than they do in shelter, food, and clothing. You pay more to the government than you do in shelter, food, and clothing. That's the majority. It's time to ask ourselves, how do we continue on down this path? That's what I'm asking you to do. Don't get engaged in the hashtags or the insults. Let's be adults and let's have a serious conversation because it's our future at risk.